you need to understand something right off the bat. When you get a brand new engine, it's not actually finished. It's just assembled. Think of it like a raw block of marble just waiting to be sculpted. And guess what? Those first few hours of running it, that's where you do the final, most important machining. So just forget everything you think you know. Today, I'm going to show you how the pros, how real engine builders actually get it done. You know, the biggest mistake I see, and I see it all the time, comes from this well-meaning but totally backward advice. This whole idea of babying a new engine, keeping the revs super low, being gentle on the throttle. That is hands down the fastest way to ruin its potential for life. The engineering truth, the reality, is that a new engine craves load. It needs deliberate, controlled pressure to become the powerful, efficient machine it was meant to be. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to zoom way in, take a microscopic look at what an unfinished engine surface really is. Then we'll get into the physics of how a piston ring actually seals. That's the magic right there. After that, I'll give you the exact step-by-step checklist to follow. We'll look at how to read the data to know if you nailed it, cover a few things from modern engines, and then finally, we'll reveal the hidden power you unlock by doing all of this right.
Okay, so to really get the why behind all of this, we need to zoom in. I mean, way in. We're talking about going down to the microscopic level to see what the inside of a new engine cylinder walls actually looks like.
The science that governs this whole process is called tribology. It sounds complicated, but it's really just the study of how surfaces that are moving against each other interact. Think friction, wear, lubrication. This is the entire engineering principle behind why braking in an engine isn't some old-school myth. It's a very real, very controlled scientific process. So get this. A brand new cylinder wall isn't smooth like a piece of glass. If you looked at it under a powerful microscope, it would look like a mountain range. Seriously, these jagged, sharp peaks are called asperities. And the entire goal of braking in an engine is to cleanly shear off the tops of these mountains without wrecking the valleys in between them. And this right here, this is the perfect illustration of what's happening. Engineers call it plateau honing. Before you start, you've got these sharp peaks, that's the RPK, towering over these deep valleys that are meant to hold oil, the RVK. Now, during a proper break-in, the load and pressure from combustion cleanly shear those peaks flat. What you're left with is a beautiful, smooth plateau, the RK, for the piston rings to ride on. But here's the crucial part. The valleys that hold the oil are still there. If you drive too gently, all you do is round over and polish those peaks, glazing the whole surface and making it totally useless for holding oil. Now let's talk about the star of the show, the most critical part of this entire process, the piston rings. If you can understand how these little guys actually create a seal, then everything else is going to click into place. This sentence right here, this is the public enemy number one. I swear, this one little piece of advice, repeated over and over for decades, has probably created more weak, oil-burning engines than anything else in history. It is completely, fundamentally, scientifically wrong. And I'm about to show you exactly why. Here it is. This is a secret. A piston ring has some of its own spring tension, sure, but that's almost nothing. It's a tiny fraction of the force we actually need. The real work is done by the insane pressure from combustion. When that air-fuel mixture ignites, that massive pressure spike doesn't just push the piston down, it also gets behind the piston ring and shoves it outwards against the cylinder wall with incredible force. That is the pressure that shears the tops off those microscopic mountains. No load means no pressure. No pressure means no seal. It is literally that simple. All right, enough theory. I know you've been waiting for this part. Here is the exact step-by-step procedure. This is how you take all that science and put it into practice. Okay, first 20 minutes, all we're doing is a gentle heat cycle. Let all the parts get warm, expand a bit, and settle in. Then shut it down and let it cool completely. After that, for the first 100 kilometers or so, you need to constantly vary the engine speed. Accelerate with purpose. I'm talking 50 to 80% throttle. And then, just as important, let the engine brake on its own. It's that cycle of pressure followed by vacuum that really forces the rings to seat perfectly. From there, you just widen that RPM range up to the 500-kilometer mark. And then, and this is the single most important part, you change the oil and the filter. This is non-negotiable. You have to get all those tiny metal particles you just sheared off out of there. After that, you're pretty much good to go. So you've done the work, you've followed the procedure, but how do you actually know if it worked? Well, you don't guess, you use data. We're engineers, remember? We measure things. This is how we grade your performance. Think of this as your engine's first blood test.
That first oil sample you take at 500 kilometers should be full of wear metals. And that's a good thing. Don't panic. Seeing high levels of iron and chromium means the rings and cylinders did their job and made it together. High copper and lead means the bearings have settled in nicely. But the key, the real test, is the second sample. You absolutely have to see a massive drop in those numbers. If they stay high, something went wrong and the break-in failed. We're also looking for things like silicon, which means dirt got in, or sodium, which could be a coolant leak. Either of those is a major red flag.
And here we have the final exam, the leak down test. This is the one that tells no lies. It directly measures how much pressure is escaping past those piston rings you just worked so hard to seat. We usually do this along with a regular compression test. A perfect A+ break-in is going to show a leak down of under 5%. If you're seeing numbers over 15%, there's a problem. And anything over 25%, that's a failure. It means the ring's never sealed, period. This is the ultimate pass-fail grade on your work.
It's a fair question, right? What if you got a car where the break-in was already done, but done wrong? How do you diagnose the most common problem that comes from that? Well, the number one failure, by far, is something called cylinder glazing. A healthy cylinder wall has this beautiful, visible 45-degree crosshatch pattern that's machined in there specifically to hold oil. But a glazed cylinder, which is what you get from driving too gently, has been polished into a mirror. It's so smooth it can't hold oil, the rings can't seal against it, and what you get is an engine that burns oil and has permanently low power. And the worst part? The only way to fix it is to tear the entire engine down and re-hone the cylinders. Prevention is really the only cure here. Now, of course, not all engines are built exactly the same. So let's just take a quick second to cover a couple of special cases that you need to pay a little extra attention to.
A lot of high-performance engines use forged pistons instead of the standard cast ones. Because of the way they're made, they actually expand a lot more when they get hot. This means they're built with more clearance when the engine is cold, which makes them a bit noisy sometimes. But it also means you absolutely must warm the engine up properly before you hit it with serious load. Going full throttle on a cold engine with forged pistons is the fastest way to scuff the piston skirts and basically ruin your expensive build. And modern engines? They've got all this amazing but very sensitive tech. Think variable valve timing systems. These things work using oil pressure flowing through tiny, tiny little passages. All those metal particles from the break-in process will clog and destroy these systems in a heartbeat. This is why that 500-kilometer oil change is more critical today than it has ever been. Same thing goes for turbos. Their bearings need a little time to settle in and establish a stable oil film before you start asking them for max boost.
So after all this meticulous work, what's the big payoff? Why are we so obsessed with this whole process? Well, it's not just about making the engine last a long time. It's about raw performance. 3 to 8%. Just let that sink in. That is how much of your engine's potential horsepower is literally just lost, blown past the piston rings when they're not seated correctly. That is the reward you get for doing this right. This quote from a group of professional race engine builders says it all. You're not actually adding power, you are simply retaining the power that the engine was designed to make from the very beginning. On a 500 horsepower engine, we're talking about as much as 40 horsepower that you either get to keep for yourself or you just let it leak away into the crankcase forever. So, in the end, it all comes down to this. Those first few 100 kilometers, that's the defining moment for your engine. It's where you make a choice. Is this engine going to be a simple appliance that just gets you from point A to point B, maybe burns a little oil, never feels quite as sharp as it should? Or is it going to be a precise, powerful instrument, responsive, efficient, and delivering every single bit of performance its designers intended? The choice, well, that's up to you.